Good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all. So this is the last and finale session for the session that we've kept in together with X to10x. I think this is part 4 of the series that we have introduced. And today's would be a very interesting one. I mean, we've had 3 very interesting ones before, but today's on founders' personal growth. As you all know, you will relate with it when you come to ASCENT model also, on how we are focusing a lot on the founder, the entrepreneur, and their personal growth, which is as critical as the organization or the enterprise growth as well. For this session, apart from receiving the prerequisite answers to the questions, we have done that before, shared for curation of the content, the speaker also additionally interacted with 3 other ASCENT members who have been part of this 30 people who are attending it to frame content better for this session. So hopefully we are bringing in that much more value add right in the middle of the sessions as well, which hopefully would be useful to each one of you. All of these sessions, as you're aware, are co-created and exclusively created only for you. That is the 30 ASCENT members who have opted to be part of the program. And I would again request each one of you, please switch on your camera. It's important for the, in this day and age and for presenters to actually engage with each one of you as much as possible virtually. So please do keep your cameras on, participate in discussions, and make the most of this opportunity. I don't want to sound like a teacher beyond a point, but you know what to do. Let's keep it engaging. Let's keep it interesting for the speakers as well. Today's session on Founders Personal Growth will be hosted by Gaston Schmitz. I hope I'm pronouncing your name well. And Aaron Quinn from X to10x team. And with this, I would request the speakers to kindly introduce themselves more, more in detail and take over the session.
Perfect. Thank you for that introduction. Great to see you all here on the call. My name is Gaston. That sounds very French, actually, but I'm from the Netherlands originally. I am currently in Belgium, but I spent the last 12 years in Asia. And I'm one of the partners at the Asian Leadership Institute. And the last 10 years, I've been spending most of my time doing executive coaching for primarily multinationals, family-run businesses, and particularly the last 2-3 years for fast-growing startups. And one of the main audiences that I work with are Indians. I probably spend my time more speaking to Indians than any other population, and I'm loving it. So I am actually really enjoying the ecosystem, the work through X to10x, but also through our institute. And yeah, looking forward to share some of our insights, but to also learn from you today on this session. And I'll be joined today by my co-host, Aaron. Aaron, how are you?
Very well, and good to see you all. First thing I want to actually just say, I see 3 familiar faces, which is not normal on this thing. And Samir, I see you're in a car.
Yeah, hi.
Fantastic. Hi, good to see you. And Ankit and Abhishek.
Hi, Aaron.
Thank you guys for supporting us in helping to create this today. And thank you for also those who filled in the little form about what's important to you. So just quickly, my name's Aaron. I'm originally from London. I then moved out in the corporate space to Asia, where I spent 11 or 12 years, working predominantly, living in Hong Kong, but working in China and India and right across Southeast Asia. And then before basing myself in Thailand and working for the Asian Leadership Institute. I'm now based in, I was going to say sunny Greece, but it's been pouring with rain this morning. We're very grateful that the rains have finally arrived. I work with leaders, teams all over the world, and a lot of Indian startups as well, and multinationals. So really excited to be with you guys today and share these next couple of hours with you.
Yeah. And thank you everyone for your inputs you put in the survey that helped Aaron and me to get some idea of the realities that you're facing at the moment. We always like to, I mean, obviously this is a virtual meeting, but we always want to do a quick check-in, like how are you entering this meeting today, right? Some of you might have had multiple sessions or meetings before. And one way to do that is a quick energy level poll here. So you'll see that poll pop up here. It's anonymous, but if you would have to rate your own energy level coming into this session, 1 is I'm ready for a nap, actually, and 10 is let's go for a run. Where are you on the spectrum right now?
Maybe I need coffee.
Yes. And you'll see throughout this session, we'll use a lot of participatory tools. So this is not going to be a one-way academic teaching exercise. We want to keep this engaging. So yeah, a few more answers coming in. All right, let's share these results here. So here you can see your that's good to hear. There's not too many after lunch dips, so to see, or so we got most people are actually quite high, and 25% is 10 out of 10. So that makes us happy as facilitators. So excellent.
If you had ready for a drink, I think a lot of people would have marked that as well.
Good. We can't help you with that, unfortunately, but we're gonna do our best to make this engaging. We are gonna share a few slides. This is not going to be a slide heavy and like exercise, right? I'm sure all of you see enough PowerPoint slides throughout the week, so we're gonna make this fairly light. This, by the way, is our institute in Chiang Mai, Thailand. This is where we used to host a lot of founders and heads of family-run business for coaching retreats. Obviously, the last 18 months, that's been relatively empty, or at least a lot of clients from Thailand could still come, but that's where it all started. So the Institute's been around for over 40 years. And again, primarily focused on the Asia market, but we do operate globally. And what do we have in store for you? What can you expect? Now, the interesting thing is this session is not so much about your company. This session is more about you as a person, as a founder or a senior leader in that company, and create a bit of space to step back and reflect on ourselves as leaders. And so we'll do some check-ins. Aaron will help us with that to get us going. Then we're going to extract some of our key learnings. We want to hear from you, but we're also going to share some of our main takeaways, having coached hundreds of startup and family-run business founders over the years. So we want to share some of our key insights there. And then we're going to talk about 3 major skills that we've seen are critical for people in your situation or your role in organizations. The first one is we're going to talk about how can you manage your attention. We call attention your biggest asset as a leader or as a founder. And where's that attention at the moment going for you? Is that attention flowing to the things you want your attention to flow to? Or does that get hijacked and we become reactive? And so we're going to talk about how to regulate your own attention as a leader. And we're going to talk about mindfulness as a tool to do that. Secondly, we're going to talk about self-awareness, this pretty general term, and what does it really mean? And why is it so important? And we're going to talk about how can you move beyond your programmed style of leadership and start becoming even more fluid, flexible, and expand your repertoire of options so you can deal with the ongoing uncertainty and ambiguity in today's world. So we're going to talk about self-awareness. And finally, we're going to talk about feedback and understanding your blind spots. One thing is clear, that the higher you get in an organization, the less feedback you receive. And we've seen that particularly in an Indian context. And so a lot of our clients asking like, I actually don't know how I'm being perceived. How can I still seek feedback? How do I still know how to best lead my people? So we're going to give you a few tips and practical questions you can use to understand how you're being perceived in the organization today. Sounds good? So those are some of our ideas. Aaron, you want to help us with some check-ins here?
Yeah, I'm actually just going to say before I dive into check-ins, I have 4 tips. I think they were covered just at the beginning, but just to just in case anyone who joined in late missed them. So just to get the most out of this invitation, if at all possible, keep your videos on. It's great to see people's faces. Yeah, don't be shy unless you're sitting in the bath, then fair enough, I get it. Also, I would say, accept undivided attention. Really try to be fully engaged, and participate as much as you can. Okay, so we're going to go into breakout rooms, but when we're in the main room, if you have a point of view, want to see, put your hand up or share. Really, that's the most important thing. So before we dive in, one thing we always want to do is do a quick check-in. Now, most of you probably get, asked how you're doing in any given moment, and the normal default answer is, I'm fine. Well, as leaders, one of the most important things that to become aware of at any point is what is your internal state in any given moment. Now, we call this the internal weather check-in. The reason we say that is that if you actually check in with how you feel right now, you'll notice it's already different or shifted from how you probably felt when you first came on the call, or whatever you felt in the meeting you were just in before this, or where you're going to be next. And a lot of the times for leaders, we're just not aware of that. But just like the weather is constantly changing. When I came on this call, the rain was pouring outside. Now the sun has just emerged. And when we're aware of our internal state, it's very useful for when we're going into the next particular thing we're going to talk about. So, if I've just come out of a meeting and I'm feeling a bit insecure or frustrated, or maybe a little bit annoyed, if I'm not aware of that, and I go and have a conversation with one of my investors or with a direct report, the impact of that is going to be incredible. So very powerful to just check in. What am I feeling right now? And just notice that, because that's the filter through which you're going to be experiencing the next interaction. And then you can decide whether it's useful or not. I once had a client who would have a weather thermometer literally on their laptop as a reminder every moment. What am I like right now before I have this next conversation? So we're just going to jump into breakout groups in a moment, just so you can introduce yourselves. And the exercise is very simple. Introduce yourself to the other. There's going to be in twos or threes, depending on how big the group is. Introduce yourself, the name of the company, 3 words to describe what you're feeling right now. And remember, don't plan what those words are. They'll be whatever they are in the moment when you're in the breakout group. It's not in the head, it's what you feel. And then, what was your biggest piece of advice that you've given to founders or leaders this year based on your experience? What was the biggest piece? I'm just going to check in with Gaston.
Yeah, so just
how's your weather?
So I could say, my name is Gaston, I work with Asian Leadership Institute. My 3 words right now, feel excited, a little hungry, and curious to learn more about all of you. And my biggest piece of advice is probably don't forget to take care of yourself in all of this. I've seen a lot of founders running towards forms of burnout or not regulating their own energy levels enough. Yeah, that's probably my biggest piece, just as an illustration.
Okay, I'm going to drop you all into a breakout. Any problems?
Yeah, just to explain, I don't know if people are familiar with breakout groups, but in Zoom, what we're going to do is you're automatically going to go into small groups of 3, and you're going to answer these 3 questions with each other. You'll have 9 minutes in total, and then you're automatically going to be brought back to this main room. This is, some of you have experienced this technology, maybe for some it's new, but it ensures that we all get some airtime to speak and share. Make sure that when the pop-up comes up, you accept the breakout group. All right, welcome back. Nobody lost in cyberspace?
I'll never know.
All right, let's go for it, Aaron.
Yeah, so great. I hope you had an opportunity there just to connect with each other. Interesting also to just be able to check in honestly, hey, remember, there's never a good or bad way of being. It's just the way we are, and it passes and it changes. Curious if anyone just wants to share their biggest piece of advice of the year in plenary, if they want to just take a mute off and share what was important for them. And I know there's lots of people, so. Well, if anyone wants to share in the chat as well.
I would like to share what my one of my people in the breakout room said, which was very deep. So instead of mine, I'll share his. His biggest piece of advice is he sits back every evening and reflects how the day that he's just spent is going to feel like in 20 years hence. So that was his biggest piece of advice, which I thought was extremely deep and very philosophical.
Beautiful, beautiful. I have to try and work out who that person was over the course of this. Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else some big advice they want to share with the group?
Imagine you would have to give a piece of advice to somebody who's starting new company or is a fairly new leader. What would it be? Love to hear.
When I shared with my group, basically, that's what we're talking in our trust group also. And my thought process for them was that to achieve our goals as organization, we need to be hard-nosed and lead from the front, and let our organization goals not be diluted by employees' comfort zone or weaknesses. So that was my thought to my team. So.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank
Naveen.
And one more.
So
words of wisdom.
Okay.
Well, I keep telling my fellow leaders that not to be too hard on yourself. You know, I think as entrepreneurs and leaders of the organization, we take the professional hits and misses too personally. So that's what I keep telling people, that it's okay, you know, it's not only you and it's the entire team. So that's what even I shared within the breakout room, that not to take things too personally.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you. If anyone else wants to share anything in the chat, feel free to do so as well. It's there if you want to just share something, but without having to speak out.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Now, we in our work, right, for decades with founders, especially family-run businesses, we learned also a number of things, and we want to share when we especially work with individual leaders. Yeah, great. Thank you, Sanjay. Be present. We'll get to that in our next topic. Actually, we learned a number of things, and we want to share with you a few of our thoughts. Now, we worked with multinationals. We also worked with a lot of the fast-growing startups, as you can see here on the right. And one thing that we've learned, apart from that, it can be lonely at the top, which I guess many of you can relate to. We've also learned that it's really important for founders to scale as fast as their company. There's a lot of attention, a lot of theory and books written about how to scale your company, but we've seen that if the founder doesn't scale at the same rate, that can become your biggest bottleneck. And the problem with that is that what got you here won't get you there. So a lot of the formulas, personality patterns, behaviors, styles of leadership that got you to a certain level of success is not the same set that's going to get you to the next level of success. And that's why we come in as coaches, because a lot of that is not even conscious for leaders or founders. They just lead in a particular way. We call it your autopilot way. And you start to gradually realize as the environment changes, as the company scales, that might not be good enough anymore. And then we need to start reinventing ourselves, right? I was talking with Binny Bansal a few weeks ago as well. He says, yeah, probably about every 18 months, a founder needs to completely reinvent himself or herself. I thought that was quite an interesting estimate, because in our work as well, we've seen that need to reinvent yourself. And what does that really mean? We're going to talk about, but that's important. Another lesson we've learned is that, especially in family-run business, in an Indian context in particular, there's a lot of overlap between business issues and interpersonal or family issues. And then decision-making can suddenly get affected by more emotional factors, more psychological dynamics, rather than just business dynamics. This also impacts succession planning, intergenerational ownership, right? So we work with a lot of patriarchs of businesses that need to learn to let go, that need to learn to not get too attached to what brought them success in the past, and now need to give ownership and space to that new generation. And so that overlap of business and family, psychological, emotional dynamics, that's kind of our expertise. Our institute was founded by an American psychotherapist specialized in family dynamics. So we try to bring those fields together. Now you might ask, what do you guys work on? If you work, say we do 6-month coaching engagements with owners or founders, what do we actually talk about? What do we help improve? There are a few of the common growth areas we work on with founders or leaders. Hire and manage new talent, sometimes that have more experience than you, or that are not part of the initial family, obviously, when there's professional layer of management coming in. How do you build a high-performing team? The 3 R's we always refer to in terms of co-founder or family-run family members at the top of a company. They always need to consider the 3 R's: rewards, roles, and responsibilities, and how do these evolve as the company grows. We work with clients on managing time and energy. This was one of the topics that came out of your survey as well. How to delegate, let go, but mix that with accountability, having the difficult conversations with people as well. Creating the right culture in your company. Most leaders don't give that proactive attention. Culture gets built kind of organically as an extension of the personality of the founder. But we've seen that if you proactively create culture, that can be a great competitive advantage and create loyalty, right? And minimizes attrition. We also work with founders on how to have leadership presence, gravitas, public speaking, which becomes more and more important as your company grows. And then we have emotional awareness and resilience, especially the last 18 months, where I'm sure all of you had to adapt, adjust, show agility. How does that occur at the emotional level? And how do you deal with the level of pressure and uncertainty that most of you probably hasn't experienced before? So we help build resilience. And last but not least, how do you scale inspiration across the company? For most of the companies of your type, the CEO or the founder is the main source of inspiration. So you pump in inspiration and vision throughout the company. But as you grow, as you scale, that can't just depend on you. And how do you create authentic other sources of that inspiration in your company so that that dependency on you at that level also reduces? So I'm curious, and when Aaron spoke to 3 of you, we saw these survey results. I think number 1 came out as one of the key issues. Number 2, I think that's linked, 1 and 2. Number 4 came up several times in the survey outcomes, like where does my time flow? And the last one as well, scaling that inspiration. So any other areas that are really alive for you that are not captured here?
Yeah, for me, I add that becoming aware of one's blind spots, which restrict future growth or can be an obstacle to to business and personal growth.
Great. That is actually, it was number 10. It's
Okay.
feedback, right? How do you generally get enough feedback to understand whether you're on the right track? Yeah. That was a big takeaway from the survey, right? Most of you shared that it's been hard to get substantial, especially constructive feedback. Great. Anything else we would add? We have seen that for family-run businesses, the dynamics and challenges take a very different shape than, say, tech startups, right? And again, those nuances and dynamics become much more important. We do a lot of group work, right? So with family members together to create clarity, but it gets more and more complex, we've seen in family-run businesses. Yeah. So those are some of our learnings. Now let's share our first superpower, as we call it, or super skill that we've seen is very powerful if you enhance that as a leader, and that's mindfulness, or that ability to self-regulate your attention. So we'll give you two definitions here. Before I share that, when you hear the word mindfulness, what's the first association or first words that come to mind? Can you share some of that with us?
Yeah, meditation.
Meditation. What else?
Being here and now.
Yes. Present moment. Yeah.
Awareness.
Perception and insight into self.
Yeah. Perception,
Reviewing
insight.
your day at the day end.
Mm-hmm. Stepping back, reflecting. Yeah. Yeah. So we call mindfulness one of, sorry, Aaron? Right.
No, I was just saying, I've got some in the chat as well. Self-awareness, being present, alert,
yeah.
Meditation. Yeah.
So obviously it's become very popular, right? The last few years. I mean, when we started the Institute 40 years ago, we adopted already this mindfulness-based approach because we found it very powerful and consider it almost a competitive advantage if leaders really develop this skill. Now let's demystify this term, first of all. What does it really mean? And we'll share two definitions here. The first one is mindfulness can be seen as the ability to self-regulate your attention. And most of us go through our day and our attention goes in all kinds of directions. Some of us are maybe more reactive than proactive. And if you look at a recent study at Harvard Business School, what they realized that on average, 40% of the time, our mind is not on task. So our mind is wandering 40% of the time. So they did this research and they measured, like, is our concentration and focus still on what we were set out to do, or did that mind wander? Now, 40% is a high percentage. If you just imagine that your entire leadership team, 40% of the time, they're not actually on task, but they're somewhere else, that can have quite some impact. And the other interesting piece of that study is they realized that the more the mind is wandering, the more it's correlated with unhappiness. So the more the mind wanders, the more restless we feel, and generally don't feel as content or fulfilled. It also showed that about 70% of executives have regularly trouble paying attention in meetings. You might experience some of that right now, right? Your mind is somewhere else, or you're solving some business problem, or you're getting bombarded with a WhatsApp thread or whatever it is. But obviously these days, our attention becomes our most important asset, and mindfulness can be a tool to develop that. The second definition focuses on a different aspect of mindfulness. It's non-judgmental awareness. Awareness of what's going on internally and externally. Now, most of us as leaders, we're pretty good in being aware. You've had decades of experience, most of you you can pick up signals, you can read people, but that very often comes with a particular degree of judgment. So we have an awareness and we instantly add right, wrong, good, bad, should, shouldn't. We attach a particular judgment to that awareness or to that perception. Now there's a danger in that. Why? Because the moment that you judge either a person or a situation, the learning function in your brain shuts down. This is very interesting. When you judge, you stop learning. What happens instead is you mostly will see what you already believe instead of believing what you see. This is called confirmation bias. I'll give you an example. If you walk into a meeting with your board or with your leadership team, and you already have made up your mind about the people in that room and certain judgments, whether it's positive or negative, you tend to stop learning about these people when you enter that room. You're now mostly going to see what you already believe about these people. For example, if I like Aaron, I tend to see the good things that Aaron does. If I don't like Aaron, I tend to see the mistakes, right? And so we have these biases that filter our experience. And our invitation is not to say, never judge. That's kind of unrealistic. But if you want to learn more about a situation or a person, suspend your judgment. Adopt, this observer mode where you take out some of the right, wrong, good, bad, should, shouldn't, and you'll pick up many more data points than you would do otherwise. This is very useful when you need to influence a person or a situation. And so that's another big benefit of mindfulness. Does this make sense to people? Does this maybe resonate with your own experience?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree completely.
And this is a muscle that we can train. That's the good news, right? So we're working with a lot of clients to gradually let go of judgments or become aware of them in order to gather more information. Now, why would you care else about mindfulness? A lot of studies that show the more mindful you get, the less stressed and anxious you become. And you get less caught up in your own emotional states, right? So you have the ability to see your emotions rather than be your emotions. And that can be very useful. Also, generally more mindful leaders experience more joy and satisfaction. They did an interesting research with senior executives, and they looked at when you as an executive have achieved a certain milestone. Imagine you hit your quarterly numbers or your annual plan, or you pulled in that big client. How long does the executive feel this sense of fulfillment and achievement? What is your best guess?
I think they should put the answers to this in the chat. I'm curious to see what people think. How long do you stay in that sense of achievement? A day, 2 hours,
yeah,
a few seconds, an hour.
What the research shows, it's somewhere between 5 and 7 seconds. And then it's the next thing, right? It's the next task, it's the next goal, it's the next. And 5 to 7 seconds is not even enough to reprogram part of your brain, right? To make it easier to access that state in the future. I see this a lot with the tech startups that pull in a fundraise.
Is he frozen or is it?
Yeah, I think
he's frozen. Okay, I'll finish his sentence. Put in the
right.
fundraise.
Sorry, I think
I was going to finish your sentence for you, Gas. Are you there? Well, I think you get the gist of where that was going to go, but it's incredible. They can literally have one of the biggest moments, and within seconds, they celebrate a little bit. They're already working out what to do next. I He'll join us back in again. So yeah, three big benefits. Mindfulness, less stress, ability to also start to change behaviors. A lot of the time we're talking about, what got you here won't get you there. The only way you're going to start to be able to change some of those behaviors is to be able to have the awareness and have the ability to see the ones you want to change when they change and exercise new ones. And then, of course, much more joy and in whatever you're doing, which ultimately, most of you guys are all of you guys are incredibly successful. And it's amazing, if I was to speak to your wives, husbands, how much of that joy and fulfillment is actually really being, fully experienced and expressed on a day-to-day basis. So we often interview, when we do even in coaching, we speak to partners, personal partners as well, just to really see how much is the leader fully living their life and experiencing it fully. And Gaston, I think there was
yeah, I got kicked out. That was my opportunity to practice some mindfulness. So yeah, Aaron, apart from these benefits, you want to talk about this last benefit?
Yeah, I mean, and then there's the final one, which actually, which we see a lot when we speak to, especially direct reports, employees of people. What is the one characteristic that really signifies the difference between good leadership and great leadership? And oftentimes people think, strategic thinking or problem solving or being inspirational, all of these things, and they're all important. But the number one factor that overrides all others in a study conducted by Bain was presence. The ability for a leader to be fully present in the moment. And that was a factor that was in literally every leader that actually made it to the top. And mindfulness is absolutely key in that particular space.
So in that study, they looked at 33,000 employees. What did they value the most in their leaders? And all these gray items here on the slide were important, but the number one thing was the red one in the middle. It's the ability for the leader to bring their full presence to interactions, to have undivided attention when they speak to them. That was more important than vision or problem-solving ability. Yeah.
So, you guys here, we're curious. How mindful are you already? So this is I'm not going to call it a test. It's not a test, but this is a little exercise developed by the Harvard Business Review, and it's a check-in. And you get an opportunity to see, where am I at the moment? Now, there's no right or wrong answers. There's no scores for being the most mindful, the best. In fact, I would argue that actually anyone who overly thinks they're too mindful may be less mindful than they realize that they actually are. So there can be trick questions in it in that sense. But there's a list of questions, and we want you to just take a moment, if you've got a pen and paper, to just run through them and score yourself on each one. And each of these statements that are there. No, yes, yeah. Oh yes, yeah. So you'll notice in that if there's 12, the first 12 statements, the higher your score is, the more mindful you are. The second 8 statements, the lower your score, the more mindful you are. So take a few moments now to just run through each of those questions and maybe give yourself a little score. Now, be as honest with yourself as you can. This is, I'm not going to publish this on Facebook. Nobody else is going to see this. It stays within our little group. But really, think about the way you're living your life at the moment. How would you score yourself? We're just going to give you a few minutes to just absorb those and take some time to do that.
Yeah, we don't need to add them up, and there's no prizes at the end for anybody. But it's more what we invite you to do is like, which statements stand out for you? Maybe gave you some insight. And if there's one thing that comes out of this that you say, okay, I probably should work on that. Now, what's one commitment? Let's not get overly ambitious here, but what would be one thing? We just add in the chat. I mean, this is the same slide, but in a file, because we'll just go into quick pair share, Aaron.
Yeah, I'm going to go into a quick pair share. So I'm going to put you into breakouts. It might be 3 in one room, but yeah, insights. What did you come from that? What would you like to change as a result of this, if anything? What surprised you, if anything? And we'll see you back here in 6 minutes. So 3 minutes each, 6-7 minutes. Yeah. All right,
again,
away you go.
Yeah, please accept, and we'll see you after. A lot of mindful faces. Was it humbling?
Yes, it was.
It's humbling for us every time we do it. So no worries.
Everyone's in the same boat. That's what we realize. Everyone had the same numbers where they scored themselves very high or low.
Okay. Oh yeah, interesting. Like which one stood out?
Like number 18 for us at least.
Me and Angit were in the same group. So for me, it was, I scored very low on 15, 17, all 3. Yeah. And also on 3.
3, yeah. 3 and 17, 18.
All 3 of us were in the same group, so we all scored the same, I guess. 16, 17.
The interesting thing about 3 is, I mean, if you want to, it's a great book called Indistractable by Nir Eyal. It's an author, is a very popular speaker in Silicon Valley at the moment. And what he realized through his studies is that most of the reasons why we get distracted are not the external triggers, like the WhatsApp bings and the email pings and the this and that. It's actually the internal discomfort with a certain task, or the aversion to it, or we might not get a lot of energy from doing that. Those are often the reasons why we pivot, right? Or why we do something else and we start doing this multitasking, right? Which essentially is a myth, right? If you look at multitasking, the mind can only think of one thing at the same time. So when you do what is called multitasking, what you're actually doing is switching attention very quickly, and you're practicing short attention spans. So you get very good at short attention spans. Now, it's difficult in your reality to never multitask. I mean, the amount of requests you get and the amount of asks. So, but eventually, if you want to create more deep work, another great book, Deep Work, we have to move more towards monotasking rather than multitasking. But our environment generally triggers us towards the opposite. Yeah.
It's interesting to think, because the external ones you have some control over. I mean, you can switch off your notifications a little bit if you choose to. But actually, the internal ones are the ones we're less aware of. And actually, it's 90% of them. So if you start to pay attention, like that internal weather report, you'll notice, wow, I've suddenly got an urge to switch task and go into checking my email now. You'll notice there's probably some discomfort that came up. Or maybe there was some overwhelm or some stress, or maybe you didn't think you were doing as well as you could be, or something is happening that we don't like to feel. And in that moment, we'll find something else to do. I used to do it. I used to notice lying in bed at night, if I suddenly felt this, I worried about something I hadn't done the next day, I immediately grabbed my phone and would watch something or look at something. And I was like, oh, I just wasn't happy to be with the feeling. I found a distraction to avoid it. So the more you start to pay attention to that, you'll notice. And if you can sit with it and allow it to pass, the ability to be distracted changes. Curious, anything else that came up from that? Any other insights about yourself? Any other commitments or practices that you would do on the back of that little check-in? If you want to share in the chat, also can do.
So for me, there were quite a few points that, like, honestly, I felt like once you ask the question, I realized that I'm not doing this or doing this wrong. But until the question was asked, there was always just, it went under the radar where it was happening, but it wasn't registered as, like, you know, now I see it as something to work on and improve. Until then, it was never it was just something that was happening. Like sitting still and doing nothing was, I mean, still is a problem for me. I keep getting distracted by notifications and work calls even right now in this meeting. So, you know, these things never struck me. It's nice. It's helping quite a bit.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, it's we see it as an undiscussed superpower sometimes. It's like exercising a muscle, just like going to the gym. Sometimes it can feel like you're not doing anything because practically not doing something feels like you're not doing something. But it's useful. Anybody else?
Yeah, hi Aaron. Could you share some light on how to be creative at work, apart from like work-related things, or just anything on that point?
Well, how to exercise this muscle in the work environment? You mean in the?
What do you mean with creative, Aditya?
Yeah, it's the number 7. Like how to have the mental energy to be creative at work.
Yes, I mean, in a sense, this is about actually. You'll notice, I don't know if you think about creativity. Whenever we're in a sort of contracted or stressed or needing to get somewhere mode, very difficult to be creative. So when we're in that sort of hurried, moving, and so it's being able to create that space, which again is around exercising this muscle, this mindfulness muscle that allows one to be okay with not knowing something, to be okay in not needing to get somewhere. And then from there, one can be more expanded and one can allow more creativity to come up. It's a bit like, you know, if you go for a walk or you do something that's very different from what you were intentional on doing, ideas start to emerge from you. But we need to create the conditions for those ideas to happen. And then we need to consciously do that. And often because we're so busy, we think busyness is the way to get somewhere, but it actually inhibits creativity. Often I would put in schedule into my diary 1 or 2 hours of doing nothing in order to allow for creative space and see that as a conscious choice, getting somewhere in a way. If you see what I mean, it's sometimes letting go of the tasks and create the space for some things to emerge, but we need to consciously create that space.
Yeah, and environment matters here, right? A lot of our clients can't get there in their normal office environment because it's so triggered to be in this adrenaline focused, or sometimes we call it the adrenaline anxiety cocktail that a lot of leaders are on, to like keep going at it, always feeling slightly behind. That's a very difficult state to get creative or do deep work. But the office environment where most of those leaders exist or operate in is enabling that. So many of our clients have to get out, change environment, change setting. I have a client every Saturday morning, 9 to 11. That's creative, deep thinking strategy time. Or Friday from 2 to 4, I have a client right now who and everyone knows, and he needs to leave the office to access that state. So it's very personalized, but get intentional around creating that.
Yeah. Because creativity is not a linear process, we tend to put it aside because we have less control over it. But actually it's just about creating the intention in the space. But,
all right.
Great stuff. Now, I'm just going to do exercising the mindfulness muscle. See, so we see it as, you know, whenever you're working with anybody to change behaviors, we see this as a foundational piece. Unless you exercise and build this muscle the same as you build it in the gym for your physical muscles, it's very difficult to catch anything that you're doing that you want to do differently. You just won't be aware. It'll be unconscious. And people often think, oh, well, I have to go and meditate for an hour a day, and I haven't got time. But in reality, that's not actually the case. There are so many opportunities in the day to build in new habits that I would say to exercise this muscle. Here's a list of just a few of them. And you can get really creative on this. I mean, I've seen people whereby, every time you get a red traffic light in the car journey, and if you're in a city like Mumbai, you're going to be in traffic. You can use those as opportunities to say, right, I'm just going to take a moment to focus on my breathing and be present. Or a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, particular one, a ritual in the morning, you make that your mindfulness practice. So when you sit down, say this first cup of coffee of the day, I'm going to really smell the coffee. I'm going to feel the sensation of the heat of the cup in my hands. I'm going to actually just really appreciate it and drink it slowly and taste all the qualities of it. Little actions like this create exactly the same effort. Walking to the bathroom and just feeling your feet every time you take up from the desk to the bathroom, feeling your feet walking to the toilet is a mindfulness exercise. Taking a few breaths before you go into a meeting each time as you transition between one meeting and next, a mindfulness exercise. Sitting in your commute, finding all these different opportunities of spaces to just build little moments into your day reconnects you back to the present moment. And the difference that you will see is phenomenal. It doesn't need to be just sitting on a cushion for.
So when we have one-on-one calls with our clients, many times we start with 1 minute of silence, because our clients come from another meeting. There's all kinds of emotional residue that's flowing into this new meeting. And just taking a minute of just following a few breath cycles doesn't need to be spiritual, connected to any particular thing. It's just bringing attention to breath. Most of the times I say that was the biggest ROI on a minute today, right? This was so helpful to kind of recalibrate the mind and get present to what's next. We work with teams that start team meetings with a minute of silence and check in with 3 words per person. It takes 5 minutes in total and creates a different level of presence for the whole team. So the main thing we want to bring across is it doesn't have to be formal meditation. You can get very creative in building this muscle.
Yeah. Should we do a very quick one now? We transition, but how about we just take, why don't we now just for ourselves, less than a minute. I'll just lead you through. We'll just take a moment. We'll transition to the next section, but know that this muscle, this ability to be fully present, is your number one leadership piece, and it's also the way you start to transform yourself to get to the next level as well. So, invitation, if you feel like it, to just join me now for 1 minute of breathing. So, yeah, just maybe give your shoulders a little shake and just relax them. You can take a little sigh and just become aware of the sensation of your body on the chair, wherever you are. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Become aware of the sensation of your feet on the floor as well. Notice the rising and falling of your belly as you breathe in and out. Notice any sounds in the room. Notice the sensation of the air through your nostrils touches your skin. And maybe some thoughts have arisen, and that's okay. Nothing wrong. Just notice them and let them go. And let's just take 6 deep mindful breaths together. Just following the breath on the in and the out. through the nose, out the nose. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you.
Right. This has all kinds of benefits. Sometimes we shift our nervous system as well. But I hope that benefited you. And it's again, it's only a minute, and sometimes that's enough. So our next part, we want to apply some of that mindfulness to ourselves and do a bit more introspection. Because we've seen that the best leaders are highly self-aware. And when we hear that word self-awareness, we can have all kinds of different connotations with that. So again, let's demystify what we actually mean with this. So the first thing, there's two types of self-awareness. One is internal self-awareness, which is, what's your self-knowledge like? Do you understand what drives you? What are your values? What are your passions? What is your vision? And how does that currently fit into what you're doing in your environment? So this is really knowing oneself and what matters to you. There's also external self-awareness. As to what extent do you see yourself, and to what extent is that aligned with how other people see you? Right? So is that perception calibrated? And internal self-awareness is very often correlated with higher levels of job satisfaction, lower levels of stress and anxiety, because you understand what matters to you and you create an environment that matches that. External self-awareness, we measure a lot through the 360 exercises we do with clients. Right? So if we have a 6-month coaching engagement with a founder, we do a 360 exercise where we interview up to 7 different stakeholders. Those are often board members, spouse, colleagues, co-founders. And then we compare self-perception with stakeholder perception. And if in that debrief conversation, there's a lot of surprises, it means external self-awareness is low, right? So if you get a lot of like, ooh, I didn't know I was perceived that way. If there's a lot of alignment, generally external self-awareness is good. Now, it doesn't always mean external is better. You have people that are too occupied with external self-awareness and maybe too little with internal, and they become people pleasers, or they accommodate too much what other people want. You have the other side as well. You have people that are internally very self-aware, but they're not tuned into how they're being perceived by their environment. So the interesting thing is these two are not correlated. You can be high on one and low on the other. Now, we want to check in with you here. We'll launch another poll. If you would have to assess your own self-awareness, which would be kind of an average of these two, how self-aware would you see you are? Aaron, could you
Oh, yeah.
Or wait, I can launch it. Yeah.
All right.
So from 1 to 5 here, what would you say? I see a few humble people on the call. That's great. So indeed, do it. This is anonymous, right? So we just want to get a sense of where the self-assessment lies. Great, 80% in here. So let's share these results here. So yeah, very interesting. 2 out of you rate is very low, right? And then there's one person very high, and a lot of people are in the neutral or higher. That's great, I believe. Normally we have a higher bias towards the positive. Now, if you look at the research on self-awareness, and this is by, again, a Harvard professor called Tasha Eurich, she's kind of the guru on self-awareness. But she realized that 95% of people think they're self-aware, but at max 15% actually match those criteria. And the main takeaway, I'm not saying that's the case here on the call, right? But what it shows is that we tend to overestimate our own degrees of self-awareness, especially as leaders, right? And we think we're successful because we did certain things, and again, the higher we get, the less feedback we get. So external self-awareness becomes more difficult. So the work that we do with leaders is also to help raise the self-awareness. Now, there's 2 things you could do. The first thing, I'll stop sharing slides for a bit here. The first thing you can do is obviously self-reflection. Do much more introspection, understand yourself better. And this is where part of our work comes in. And we call this understanding your own autopilot, or your own personality much better. Now, one sentence we often use in our work is we say the single most limiting thing that you ever did to yourself is create a personality. And let me explain that a bit further. Your personality is that set of patterns and behaviors and tendencies that most of us programmed in quite early on in our life. To be exact, around the first 26, 27 years of our life, we program our personality. That includes our emotional patterns, how we deal with conflict, certain emotions, but also our behavioral patterns. And it's mostly informed by early stage life experiences. And then when we're in our mid-20s, we kind of agree with ourselves, okay, this is who I am, this is my identity, this is my personality. And the rest of our life, we act out that personality. Now, everyone here on the call, you did remarkably well in programming a personality, else you would not be on this call leading successful businesses to the extent that you do. So that's not a problem. And there's a lot of good stuff in our personality, or what we call your autopilot. The problem comes that once you need to deal with larger levels of complexity, uncertainty, changes in environment, you'll see that that programmed personality is not enough anymore. And it can become pretty rigid in terms of your style of leadership. Because our personality doesn't like change, it likes consistency. And so what we've seen is that the way leaders define themselves and identify themselves with a particular personality, that can become very limiting as you grow and develop as a leader. Now, the challenge is that a lot of that personality is not conscious. It's actually, and I'll share here the research. So you can see that as your autopilot way of being. It informs 80 to 95% of your day-to-day behavior. So all of us here on the call, we're not going through our day making conscious choices all the time. Most of those decisions are already programmed in our personality. And that includes all our habitual patterns of behavior. And it's who you are. So you're on autopilot when you're not mindful, when you're not choosing behavior. And so about actually 80 to 95% of our behavior is driven by unconscious, subconscious drivers. And our goal as coaches is to reduce that number. Not to make it zero, that would take too much mental effort to consciously choose behavior all the time, But we've seen that most of the challenges that leaders encounter in their own leadership development is because there's a couple of personality patterns that hold them back. Now, we don't see patterns as good or bad. The question we want to answer is it still serving you as a leader today? Let me give you one example. I grew up in an environment and a family that was very competitive. I have a twin brother, 2 other brothers. Part of my personality was being very competitive. It served me in my sports and school to some extent. But the moment that I became a coach, that pattern was not very helpful anymore, right? It's not very useful as a coach. And so I had to, first of all, be aware of that pattern because I wasn't actually that conscious of it. And then gradually shift that aspect of my autopilot to better serve the role that I'm playing right now. The same with my impatience. I grew up with a lot of impatience. I still blame my dad sometimes for that, but it was my pattern. And again, it was not necessarily a bad pattern at that time, but right now in my coaching work, impatience is not very helpful anymore. So it was another pattern. And I first didn't even think I was impatient. I just got a lot of feedback that that was the case. And so I had to gradually shift that pattern to better serve the role that I'm doing. And that's exactly what we try to do with clients. Identify and make an inventory of personality patterns, and then look at which ones are holding you back the most in terms of your leadership today. And let's shift those to eventually create a situation where you can choose to act out of your personality, or you can also choose something else. So instead of being your personality, you now can see your personality and create a wider repertoire of options for behavior. Now that's the theory, right? That's the concept, but it's incredibly powerful. Once as a leader, you realize you don't have to be your personality and you have so many other options, that can be quite revealing. Aaron, you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, just to say that, you know, everything that you programmed in served a purpose at some point. So, you know, even when, you know, meet someone and they go, I hate being a people pleaser, or I hate being, you know, and they get judgmental about the stuff they think is wrong. It was useful once. That's why you put it there. And so we need some compassion for it, which is why the mindfulness, we don't want to judge it. We just realize that it's no longer serving us, especially as leaders, to get to the next level. And so we're not about changing or reprogramming this personality. We just want to expand it. Say, oh, wow, okay, this is what I've been like. And I want to have more options and more options. And I get to choose. And then the more we can share with our fellow people that we're working on stuff, the more we realize everybody's running on their personalities, and the more we can support each other. It's not something to be ashamed of, it's something to be excited and proud of, in a sense. So we have a little exercise for you guys. We want you to take a moment to reflect on your own personality patterns. Now, as I say, you guys all won the jackpot in the personality lottery. Otherwise, you wouldn't all be the successful leaders you are today, you know. But there are some things that are holding you back. So we want you to reflect on 2, maximum 3. What are some of the patterns that you know you've had from maybe from childhood that are really still serving you now? And you're happy that they're programmed into your personality, and you know, good, we want to keep them going. And then what are 2, maybe 3, not so useful at the moment? You can see where they came from. You can see how they're holding you back into being the leader you really want to be to take your organization to the next level. So I'm just going to give you a few minutes, a couple of minutes, to just reflect on those on your own now. And you know, maybe just make a couple of notes and see what comes up for you. Okay, if any of you are struggling with any of these, especially the limiting ones, well, we've got a little list you can look at that from our experiences come up, and often this is feedback from stakeholders. So often these are the ones that maybe we're not so aware of all the time, but can really limit our growth. So just going to share with you these, and maybe there's one or two you want to add, or maybe you see some resonance in some of these as well. But these are fellow leaders, limiting patterns, the most common ones we've picked up. So just take a moment to have a read through those.
You can imagine if we would give this list to your team, which ones would they tick if they think of you? That's often brings up next levels of candor.
Okay, we're going to put you into another breakout room again, with twos, might be three in your group, but otherwise mainly twos, and just take an opportunity to share with the other person, the ones that are serving you, the ones that will not, and see if there's any curious to see if there's any similarities in any of that as well. So we're just going to have 10 minutes, and we'll put this list up on a link for you.
There's another Dropbox link there, so you have the slide.
If you still need to see them. Okay. And then we'll see
10 minutes in pairs, and then we'll see you back.
We'll see you back shortly. 10 minutes. Okay.
You guys done already?
We were just two of us, so it got done quicker. So we thought we should return to the main session.
Okay.
Okay, cool. I'm curious, what came up for you?
So for me, it was the one thing that I lag behind is, I try to be perfect. So that was a habit that helped me earlier on, wherein, I myself had to be perfect and I could do it myself. But now if I insist to be perfect for the entire team, then, it sometimes slows down the things that, even if you're say at 75-80%, you should move on. So sometimes, but over a period of time, I'm trying to, curtail that thing, that habit in me. And the other thing that I would, the most in the posting that you have done, like passing judgment, the need to rate others and impose our standards on them. So sometimes the way we are doing things, we feel that the others also need to do it. So those are the two limiting factors which I felt. So this time I did not let Ankit speak. I told him that Ankit, please.
Ashwin told me that you are the guy who speaks a lot. So that was how our conversation started, in a good way. So I've got that feedback, adding too much value. I think there was point number that. So sometimes I've been always upfront about giving my opinion. So that's how I've been brought up, that if you have something in mind, just speak. So don't worry about what it's going to do and all of that. So that's why if I have something in mind, I'm not the sort who will wait for anyone. I'll just talk if I have something in mind. So that sometimes is contextually not right. And the other thing is about, I think, managing complex situations where you need to be diplomatic. That's one place where I struggle. So I cannot be diplomatic. Whatever is here and is straightforward feedback to the person who's in front of me. So I take that as my negatives. Probably something which I can work on.
Yeah, that adding too much value, number 18, is sometimes a bit counterintuitive, but we've seen it's sometimes really hard for successful people not to add value all the time and make everything 2 or 5% better. But sometimes that reduces the ownership of the other person on the task, right? And so the practice there is to ask yourself, is it worth it? Is it worth it to make this a few % better? And sometimes it is, but many times it's not. Yeah.
Great. Welcome back, everybody. I see a couple of people who came back in early were just sharing their limiting ones and what they want to work on. I think one was adding too much value, and one was passing judgment, perfectionism, speaking less diplomatic. These were just a few of the things that were emerging. Just curious, just one or two others want to share one of their limiting patterns they'd like to shift.
So we were discussing this in the group. So number 6, non-diplomatic, insensitive to politics. I have a major issue stroking, like, juniors' egos to get shit done, which is supposed to be their job. Now, like, I have a couple people who won't do work if it's delegated by me. They'll do it if it's, someone else in the organization asking them, requesting them to do it. I don't know how to work on this right now. But yeah, that is something that's there.
And there's a difference between influencing and politics, but that's a whole different conversation. But yeah, I hear you. Yeah. Samir, you were unmuting?
Sorry?
I saw Samir was unmuting there as well before.
Yeah, so for me, one of the patterns is incompletion. I mean, a lot of things in my life, I have not feel complete and don't get into completion. Somehow I am not, so I always, something is always half done.
Yeah. I have a post-it here, Samir. I have the same pattern as you. It says finish things. And I have another post-it that says stop starting, start finishing.
Yeah.
If that helps. Yes.
I think we can all relate to that one. Thank you, Samir. It often happens when we're overly excited about new things and doing things that we get pulled like a small boy, onto the next exciting venture. Right. Anyone else want to share one?
I want to understand point number six, insensitive to politics. What does it mean?
I think it means really to be insensitive to not knowing what people are, not being able to influence situations properly. So maybe we start to speak our mind in certain ways. We don't realize what's important to this person, what's important to that. We literally just give unfiltered information. And we may think we're being really authentic in that moment because we're saying, wow, well, I'm just saying what it is. But actually, as a leader, what are we committed to beyond that? And if that means that we need to understand what's important to this person or this person or this person, then the ability to influence them, have that sensitivity, because it's not to be pleasing them, but it's because the impact we want to make is bigger than just us being right. And so I think that's really the essence of it. So sometimes people get confused. They say, I'm being authentic, I'm speaking my mind. But as a leader, what are you committed to beyond just speaking your mind? And that's.
And we see it especially in matrixed organizations, but also family-run businesses, where there's a lot of those other dynamics. And you can say, like, I just don't play that, but it's the reality very often that we need to be aware or mindful of other people's needs, feelings. That doesn't mean we become inauthentic or go into pretense, but we can consider that in terms of our approach to, say, decision-making. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Last
now
point.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say this is obviously the stuff that we are aware of. It's important to become aware of the stuff that we're not aware of. We're not aware that, or we're not even aware that we're not even aware of, to be really clear on blind spots.
Yeah.
So I guess I want to share a little bit.
Yeah, so how could we figure those out? These are obviously limiting patterns that we came up with through self-reflection, but there might be patterns there in our autopilot that we're not aware of, but they are limiting us. How could we find those out?
Ask your spouse.
we always include the spouse in our 360s, and we always say it's the most important stakeholder because they often know the patterns the best, right? The autopilot. But yeah, it's indeed, it's feedback, right? By both people and family. Now, when you as a leader go to your team members and say, can you give me some feedback? I want to get better. The likelihood that you get really good feedback is less. Because feedback has a particular charge and people aren't necessarily literate in terms of giving right feedback. They maybe feel a bit put on the spot. And so we have a few questions here that are a bit less direct than just asking people, can you give me some feedback? So first one, right? Still like to learn from me. Highlights, positives. What do you want that you're not getting from me at the moment? Is a more practical way. We really like the last two. What can I do as a leader to get your best work out? Because that's my job. Like, I need to create the conditions for your full talent, intelligence, and potential to come out. And then the last one, we call it CSS, continue, start, stop, which ensures that feedback is going to be behavioral. So instead of, I think you're a great, inspiring boss, which doesn't give me really anything to look at, right? If I ask you, okay, what would be one thing that you think I should continue doing? One thing that I should start doing or do more of? And maybe what's one thing I should stop doing because it's not actually helping? That brings the conversation much more to the practicality. And if people don't know what to say, you can say, I'd like you to think about this. And in our next conversation, I'd like to hear some of your thoughts because I'm also committed to getting better as a leader. And once we start doing that, we actually give that signal to the rest of the team to also start adopting, seeking feedback. So feedback cultures get created because the leadership is seeking feedback first. Feedback cultures is not just about having the skills to give feedback, it's also having the receptivity to seek it. And so as you see this list, one invitation we have to all of you, think about one or two people that you work with today that maybe would be worthwhile to ask feedback from. These might not be the usual suspects. These might be people that you haven't heard feedback from, and which questions could help. So take a minute to think about that. You can even think, how should I set this up? Should I take them out for lunch, or do I just do a one-on-one conversation? Or all right. Any questions on this, or any questions that you would add to this list? No? So again, I think we saw this in the survey, right? Most of you aren't necessarily getting that regular feedback. So we've seen that's critical. Now, when we work with founders or leaders, we do this dedicated 360 exercise where we speak to these 7 people, and we don't just listen to the words. We also listen to or pick up the feelings. So if I would speak to like 4 direct reports of you, and they all would say, this person has no development areas, but I can sense they're all scared and intimidated, then that's the feedback, right? So it's not just the verbal communication, it's also the nonverbal. And through our 360 exercises, we can pick up all kinds of nuances that really give you an accurate picture of how you're being perceived. All right, Aaron, 2 commitments.
Excellent. So just to finish off, we have like, in the coaching space, it's not about insights and just conversations. It's all about what are we going to commit to doing differently? Always moving forward, always a shift. And so we'd just like you to take a moment and say, answer, I think, these 2 questions. There's one thing that I learned today. Today I learned that X. Whatever is the most important to you, the main thing main takeaway from today, what would that be? And if you're going to commit to practicing one new thing as a result, when you go back into the working world in the next 5 minutes or so, what would that be? What's one thing you want to commit to going forward? Just take a moment to write that down. And before we close off, we'd love to hear just from a couple of you who wants to share what they're.
Well, put it in the chat if you can, especially your I will statement. We're just really curious if you could put I will and then your answer to that. Just curious what you can.
If anyone wants to unmute and shout it out, feel free to. Inspire the others with your commitment.
Nice.
Commit and overcommit. That's going to be great for your team, Samir.
Thank you, Sanjay. Oh, Vikram, I think you send that directly to me. Great. Excellent. So again, if there's just 1 or 2 big takeaways, thank you, Aditya, Vikram, Darshan, great one.
Yeah.
Focus, right? We know as coaches, focus on 1, if not 2 things, and get very specific about your practice, and the probability of success will increase. We wanted to thank you for your engagement and participation on this call. We are our specialization is individual coaching. So if you say, listen, I'd love to explore how to approach this a bit more seriously in terms of my own leadership development, we offer all of you the option to have a follow-up one-on-one conversation. You want to talk through some of your own realities and see what could coaching what does that even look like? Aaron and I can have a conversation with you if you're open to that. We could also then talk more about if you're needing any support on team development, which wasn't the focus of today, but we've got some things to share as well. So again, if you're interested, let Ruchika and team know. We're going to hand it over to them right now. Thank you very much for your engagement.
So feedback is very, very critical for us members. So kindly take this, because this allows us to do more customized and curated program for each one of you. So very, very important for you to take that feedback. Sorry, Ruchika, you're keeping the feedback alive now for some time?
Yes, Archana, we'll take 1 minute for members to share.
In the meantime, if anybody wants to unmute themselves, share any feedback, share any learning, love to listen to you, not just in application, but otherwise.
Real.
This is a safe space. Everybody can speak. So everybody goes quiet. It's a problem. Atul has to start picking out. Aditya?
No, Vikram here. I'd like to speak. It was an excellent session. That 1 minute before every meeting idea is really, really good. I don't know how I'm going to get my participants, especially my buyers, to say, let's relax for a minute and let's be calm. You guys as trainers, people will listen to you. We as business guys, probably tell my buyers, let's all calm down for a minute, cool down, and let's start this meeting. That's going to be a task. I need to find a way how to do that. But it's a great idea because then you can focus and get things done in a better, more positive way.
Thank you.
No, I can just say that you took us so beautifully from one topic to another. It was so seamless, engaging. None of us at least got distracted throughout this, and the cause was not us, but it was you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Samir.
Yeah, no naps today. Your question at the beginning was, what's the energy level? No naps today.
But are we running today, Ankit?
It's time for a drink now. It's Friday evening.
It's Friday night.
Not run. Friday.
No, but I think this 2 hours, I think, was about self-reflection. I think more than anything, I think these questions which you made us write and get into breakout rooms, and I think those three things what I'm thinking right now, I think that's also going to stay with me, because it sort of makes you, if you feel that I'm feeling too negative right now, it makes you reflect that you're feeling negative, and it sort of helps you. So I think the whole 2 hours was about self-reflection. So it really helped me. So thanks, guys.
Gaston, Aaron, any feedback from you on today's session? Sorry.
Aditya, I just want to say that I think they touched all the right points, because they spoke about awareness and even internal and external awareness, and how those are also very different, and also the kind of triggers which cause you to react in a certain way in certain situations. So it made us think a lot on a lot of points on how we behave in a certain situation, and yeah, it's going to be very helpful in the future for sure.
Good.
So thank you. Yeah.
Gaston, Aaron, any final words before we wind up from your end? How did you?
No, I mean, we scratched the surface, right? These 2 hours. We just introduced a few topics to just kind of get the introspection going. But obviously, when we work with leaders for a 6-month period, and we have every 2 weeks a call, and it's individual, the one thing we've seen is the autopilot gets a little bit more rigid the older we get, right? So it's harder to shift for a tech founder of 27 versus a family. It's a different process, but it's possible at any age, at any part of your stage as a leader. You can kind of reinvent and expand beyond your personality, and that's the work we're passionate about. And yeah, thank you for all diving in and sharing openly about some of these things.
Yeah, and also the fact that hopefully as well, a lot of this stuff that we share doesn't just impact you as a leader, but we see it as impacting you in your life beyond that as well. And as leaders at your level, it's not just about the work, it's about the families, about everything, and how does that all bring together so you can make the biggest impact on this planet, which all of you guys are doing. So that's what excites us about working with you all, because we know through that we see the impact you guys are having. So thank you very much for allowing us to be here.
Thank you so much for conducting this session, and I hope there were great takeaways for our members. Now it's all about going back and implementing this and incorporating this in your in your businesses. A big thank you to all the participants also for engaging with all the 4 sessions that we have conducted with xto10x, and we have tried to customize and work with the xto10x team to get this for the 30 ASCENT member participants today. I think a link has been shared by Ruchika on the.
Yes, I've already shared it.
to understand your learnings, and it will be good to, how you want to do that. Kindly note that we're also conducting a debriefing session. So, after this 4th session, we're conducting a debrief session where Ruchika will reach out to get personal feedback from each one of you, which we will be presenting it to Mr. Harsh Mariwala as well. And, we'll see what, I'm sure he has his take on it also, and we'd like to share it back with each one of you. We'll do that. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great Friday. Don't want to be between you and the drinks. So you deserve it. Please do that. And thank you, everyone. And please stay safe. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a mindful day.